Today I'm so excited to be talking to Dr. Rachel Smith, Conservation Program Manager with Disney Conservation. I am here at Disney Vero Beach Resort in Florida, where I've been coming with my family since I was a baby. We drove in our EV to avoid flying to save carbon emissions, and it only took us 30 hours. It was a really long trip. Hi, Dr. Smith. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
I am really excited to be here and talk to you, Robert.
Thank you. Sea turtles are my favorite animal. I talked to Dr. Joseph Fowler from Florida last year about them too. I've been hearing about ocean temperatures rising a lot this summer, and I wanted to talk to you about how the recent temperature rise is affecting them. On July 31st, Manatee Bay near Everglades National Park in Florida recorded a temperature of 101 Fahrenheit. That's the temperature of my uncle's hot tub. I'm worried. Are the turtles okay?
You know what? It's a complicated question, and I think it deserves a complicated answer. I think overall we're seeing increases in the sea turtle population here in Florida with some of the species that we have, but certainly not all the species. What's interesting about sea turtles is that they are very influenced by the temperature, because sea turtle nests, when they're incubating, have what's called temperature-dependent sex determination. And what that means is that under the sand, where all the little eggs are incubating, anything incubating above a certain temperature, those eggs become female, and below that temperature, they become male. So as the temperatures are rising, what we're starting to see here on Florida beaches is an increase in the number of female hatchling turtles leaving our nesting beaches.
Huh. Does that mean eventually there will be no males to help create baby turtles?
That's a great question. I think because sea turtles make us wait a really long time to answer questions that we have about them, we don't completely understand that yet. We know that there's probably a lot more female turtles being produced on our nesting beaches now than males, but what we don't understand is whether that sex ratio was skewed to begin with, and we're just seeing more of a skew towards that, or whether it really was a 50-50 ratio, and now it's a big departure from what used to be the case with sea turtles. So we're not sure. We're studying all of that now. A lot of teams are putting temperature data loggers into sea turtle nests and monitoring the temperatures. But the thing with turtles is that they take about 30 years to reach maturity when they leave these beaches to come back here and lay their own eggs. And so it takes a really long time, decades even, for us to start to be able to answer some of the questions that we're thinking about now.
All sorts of bad things happen as sea temperatures warm. Rising sea levels, storms, acidic waters, coral bleaching, algae blooms, and changing currents. Are you seeing these things starting to affect turtles?
We definitely are. So there's a lot of different human-induced threats that you just mentioned right there. I think the first one that you mentioned was sea level rise. The way that we're really experiencing that is in terms of what we call coastal erosion of our nesting beaches. So right here we're out on Florida's barrier islands. They're a very thin strip of land, and they're losing a lot of sand each year. So what tends to happen is homeowners are worried for their properties. Understandably so. They put up either coastal armoring like seawalls, or we have beach renourishment where we have sand come in the off season and get put back on the beach. That's to help preserve the beach here, but we're still studying the impact of those activities on our sea turtles as we're trying to preserve a certain amount of beach that they have left to come up here and lay their nests.
Yeah.
You also mentioned algae blooms, so we're still really learning about how those toxic blooms impact sea turtles. We see a lot of sea turtles that show up with tumors. They're called fibropapilloma tumors, and starting to explore how those are linked to things like marine pollution and algae blooms and things like that. So more questions than answers, but we definitely think that they are impacted by these things.
Rising sea levels can wash away turtles. Traditional nesting areas and coastal development projects are taking away even more suitable habitat. Not everyone respects turtle habitats as much as you do at Disney. Is sea level rise a problem here in Vero?
I do think so, and I think sea level rise is really a global issue that we're dealing with. So sea turtles nest all throughout the world, as we know, 6 of the 7 continents, and we really are seeing this coastal erosion and sea level rise associated with many of the different sea turtle nesting habitats around the world. So really what our focus is on now are thinking about ways to preserve the nesting beach habitat, and then everyday choices that we can make that can help to offset those things like sea level rise.
Yeah. Different sea turtles eat so many things: algae, seagrass, seaweed, jellyfish, crabs, sponges, shrimp, lobster, sea urchins, and fish. Warming oceans can change where turtles find their food, which can further cause them to change their nesting, mating, migrating, and feeding patterns. You release turtles with Disney Conservation and the Sea Turtle Conservancy in the Tour de Turtles, which attach transmitters to their shells to track them during their migrations. The data collected helps researchers and government make decisions about sea turtle conservation. Since 2008, Disney has studied 29 sea turtles released from Vero Beach. Are you seeing any changes at all?
That's a really good question, Robert. And I think since we've only been doing this since 2008, that's a relatively small time scale when you talk about sea turtle time scales. We just talked about how it takes 30 years for one generation to grow up and be able to return to the nesting beaches. So we haven't even hit that mark yet in the history of our partnership with Sea Turtle Conservancy on the Tour de Turtles program. What I will say is we have turtles even within the same species traveling to so many different parts of the world to reach their foraging grounds. So right now we're tracking Madame Leota and Harriet. Those were the two turtles that we released this year. And one of them has decided to go all the way up the eastern seaboard to Virginia. The other one is hanging out in the Bahamas, which I can't blame them. But as we continue this program, we're really going to learn a lot more about how these migrations speed up, slow down, if the locations change, as you mentioned, due to food availability. So that's the importance of long-term research and partnerships within sea turtle conservation so that we can start to answer those really big questions.
As climate change gets worse, so do hurricanes, which can also destroy turtle nest habitat and nesting grounds. We are here waiting for landfall of two hurricanes at the same time. Franklin here on the Atlantic side and Adalia on the Gulf coasts. Are you scared for the turtles and the new babies we saw going into the ocean this morning?
You know, it's an interesting question. I do really believe that turtles are one of the most resilient species that we have here on this planet. Turtles have been dealing with hurricanes for 100 million years. They have evolved right alongside hurricanes, and certainly we've seen turtle populations withstand hurricanes for a long time now. As we do know, hurricanes are increasing in both frequency and severity. So we are starting to see a few more impacts from hurricanes as a result of rising temperatures and all of the other topics that we've been talking about today. But it really is amazing how there can be one bad season that will wash out a lot of sea turtle nests during a bad hurricane. But if you have another great year the next year, they're right back in the game. So I think we're really hopeful that one hurricane is not necessarily enough to cause population level impacts for sea turtles.
All these threats sound pretty terrible. What can kids do to help?
Kids can do so many things to help sea turtles, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's not just kids. We can all do our part to help sea turtles. I think you're doing your part right now by making sure to spread the message and educate everybody out there about what we can do to help sea turtles and what the issues are that they're facing. But one of the most important things we can do is minimize our use of single-use plastic. That's something that we're really committed to here at Disney's Vero Beach Resort. We're eliminating a lot of the single-use plastic up at the resort, and we haven't had plastic straws here long before it was popular. But those are things we can make in our own life. Go to the store, remember to bring your reusable bag with you. Go to a restaurant, don't forget to bring your Tupperware with you for your takeaways instead of just assuming that you'll take a box from the restaurant. Those have real world implications for sea turtles. There have been lots of studies of little turtles offshore that have migrated from their nesting beaches and are trying to grow up, and almost 100% of them already have plastic in their tummies. So it's an out of sight, out of mind problem for many of us, but the decisions we make here on land really have impacts for turtles in the water.
Yeah. Disney has supported sea turtles for 20 years. Conservationists have spent 20,000 hours surveying the 5-mile stretch here at Vero Beach since 1986. Disney's animal care teams have nursed more than 300 endangered sea turtles back to health and returned them to their home in the ocean. Disney Conservation has directed more than $5 million to sea turtle conservation efforts around the world. What conservation story are you most proud of?
I think for me, I'm most proud of something that I will not attribute just to Disney's efforts, but to the collective efforts of Disney and about 200 other organizations around the state of Florida and in the U.S. here. And that is the recovery of our green sea turtle population. We're not out of the woods yet, but we have seen tremendous growth in this population that was almost harvested to extinction at the beginning of the last century due to being the favored turtle of turtle soup. And with their protection under the Endangered Species Act, which is actually, it's the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act, so we're celebrating that. And we're celebrating 20 years of sea turtle conservation at Disney, as you mentioned. But these are long-term efforts, right? And that's the approach that we have to take to save sea turtles. Long-term efforts and collaborative efforts. And so it's a matter of everybody coming together, working together, collecting data in the same way, protecting turtles, and those slow burn efforts are where we start to see those population recoveries that we're seeing today with our green turtle. So that's what I'm most proud of, but it's certainly not something that I myself alone nor Disney alone can take credit for.
It has been so great talking to you here at Disney's Vero Beach, one of my favorite places on earth. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today, Dr. Smith. Click the link below to see more of the important work Disney Conservation is doing. And remember, together kids can save the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yay! Good job, Robert! High five!